One more question about leverage. Do you think a choice of business model or a choice of product can also bring a kind of leverage to it? For example, pursuing a business that has network effects, pursuing a business that has brand effects, or other choices of business model that people could manipulate that just give you free leverage?
Yeah, there's some really good microeconomic concepts that are important to understand. One of those is scale economies, which is the more you produce of something, the cheaper it gets to make it. That's something that a lot of businesses have, basic economics 101. And you should try and get into a business where making widget number 12 is cheaper than making widget number 5, and making widget number 10,000 is a lot cheaper than the previous ones. And this builds up an automatic sort of barrier to entry against competition and getting commoditized. So that's an important one. Another one, this is along the same lines, but technology products especially and media products have this great quality where they have zero marginal cost of reproduction. So creating another copy of what you just created is free. So when somebody listens to this podcast or watches a YouTube video about this, it doesn't cost me anything for the next person who shows up. Those zero marginal cost things, they take a while to get going because you make very little money per user, but over time they can really, really add up. So Joe Rogan is working no harder on his current podcast than he was on podcast number 1. But on podcast number 1100, he's making $1 million for the podcast, whereas for the previous one, he probably lost money for the first one. That's an example of zero marginal cost. And then the most subtle but the most important is this idea of network effects. And it comes from computer networking. Bob Metcalfe, who created Ethernet, famously coined Metcalfe's law, which is the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of nodes in the network. So if a network of size 10 would have a value of 100, a network of a size 100 would have a value of 10,000. It's not just 10x more, it's 100x more because it's a square. So the difference is in the square. So you want to be in a network effects business, assuming you're not number 2. If you're number 1 in a network effect business, you win everything. So example, if you look at Facebook, right, your friends and family social networking protocol, who's their competitor? Nobody, because they won everything through network effects, which is why when people say, well, I can just switch away from Facebook, they don't realize that network effects create natural monopolies. They're very, very powerful things. And one of the dirty secrets of Silicon Valley is that a lot of the winning businesses are natural monopolies. Even ride sharing tends towards one winner take all system. Like Uber will always have better economics than Lyft as long as it's moving more drivers and more riders around. Something like Google, there's only one viable search engine. I do like DuckDuckGo, privacy reasons, but they're just always going to be behind because of network effects. Twitter, right? Where else would you go for microblogging? Even YouTube has weak network effects, but they're still powerful enough. There's really no number 2 site that you go to consume your video on a regular basis. It even turns out in e-tail, Amazon, Prime, and convenience, stored credit cards and information creates a powerful network effect. So what is a network effect? Let's just define it precisely. A network effect is when each additional user adds value to the existing user base. So your users themselves are creating some value for the existing users. The classic example that I think everybody can understand is language. Let's say that there's 100 people who live in the community and speak 10 different languages, and each person just speaks one of those 10. Well, you're having to translate all the time. It's incredibly painful. But if all 100 of you spoke the same language, it would add tremendous value. And so the way that community will play out is 10 people start out speaking 10 languages. So let's say that one extra person learns English. Well, now all of a sudden, 11 people know English. So the next person comes in to learn a new language, probably going to choose English. And at some point, let's say English gets to 20 or 25 people, it's done. It's just going to own the entire language marketplace, and the rest of the languages will get competed out, which is why long term, the entire world is probably going to end up speaking English and Chinese. China is closed off on the internet, but the internet itself is a great leveler, and people who want to communicate on the internet are forced to speak English because the largest community of people on the internet speaks English. I always feel bad for my colleagues who grew up speaking foreign languages in foreign countries because you don't have access to so many books. So many books just haven't been translated into other languages. So if you only spoke French or you only spoke German or you only spoke Hindi, for example, you would be at a severe disadvantage in a technical education. Invariably, if you go and get a technical education, you have to learn English just because you have to read these books that have this data that has not been translated. So languages are probably the oldest example of a network effect. Money is another example. We should all probably be using the same money, except for the fact that geographic and regulatory boundaries have created these artificial islands of money. But even then, the world tends to use a single currency as the reserve currency at most times, currently the US dollar. So network effects are a very powerful concept. When you're picking a business model, it's really good idea to pick a model where you can benefit from network effects, low marginal costs, and scale economies. And these tend to go together. Like anything that has zero marginal cost of production obviously has scale economies. And things that have zero marginal cost of reproductions very often tend to have network effects because it doesn't cost you anything more to stamp out the thing. So then you can just create little hooks for users to add value to each other. So you should always be thinking about how your users, your customers can add value to each other, because that is the ultimate form of leverage. You're on the beach in the Bahamas or you're sleeping at night and your customers are adding value to each other. The tweet storm is very abstract. It's deliberately meant to be broadly applicable to all kinds of different domains and disciplines and time periods and places. But sometimes it's hard to work without concrete example. So let's go concrete for a minute. Look at the real estate business. You could start at the bottom. Let's say you're a day laborer. You come in, you fix people's houses. Someone orders you around, tells you break that piece of rock, sand that piece of wood, put that thing over there. There's just all these menial jobs that go on a construction site. If you're working one of those jobs, unless you're a skilled trade, like say a carpenter or electrician, you don't really have specific knowledge. And even carpenter or electrician is not that specific because other people can be trained how to do it. So you can be replaced. So you get paid your 15, 20, 25, 50. If you're really lucky, $75 an hour, but that's about it. You don't have any leverage other than from the tools that you're using. So if you're driving a bulldozer, that's better than doing it with your hands. So day labor in India makes a lot less because they have no tool leverage. You don't have much accountability. You're a faceless cog in the construction crew, and the owner of the house or the buyer of the house doesn't know or care that you worked on it. One step up from that, you might have a contractor, like a general contractor, who someone hires to come and fix and repair and build up their house. That general contractor is taking accountability. They're taking responsibility. So now if, let's say they got paid $250,000 for the job. Sorry, I'm using Bay Area prices. So maybe I'll go rest of the world prices. $100,000 for the job to fix up a house. And it actually costs the general contractor, all said and done, $70,000. Well, that contractor is going to pocket that remaining 30. So they got the upside, they got the equity, but they're also taking accountability and risk. So if the project runs over and there's losses, then they eat the losses. But you see, just the accountability gives them some form of additional potential income. And then they also have labor leverage because they have a bunch of people working for them. But it probably tops out right there. You can go one level above that and you can look at a property developer. This might be someone who is a contractor who did a bunch of houses, did a really good job, then decided to go into business for themselves. And they go around looking for beaten down properties that have potential. They buy them. They either raise money from investors, they're fronted themselves. They fix the place up, and then they sell it for twice what they bought it for. Maybe they only put in 20% more. So it's a healthy profit. So now a developer like that takes on more accountability, has more risk. They have more specific knowledge because now you have to know which neighborhoods are worth buying in, which lots are actually good and which lots are bad, what makes or breaks a specific property. You have to imagine the finished house that's going to be there, even when the property itself might look really bad right now. So there's more specific knowledge, there's more accountability and risk, and now you also have capital leverage because you're also putting money into the project. But conceivably, you could buy, a piece of land or a broken down house for $200,000 and turn it into $1 million mansion and pocket all the difference. One level beyond that might be a famous architect or a developer, where just having your name on a property because you've done so many great properties increases its value. One level up from that, you might be a person who decides, well, I understand real estate and I now know enough of the dynamics of real estate that rather than just build and flip my own properties or improve my own properties, I'm going to be a massive developer. I'm going to build entire communities. Another person might say, I like that leverage, but I don't want to manage all these people. I want to do it more through capital. So I'm going to start a real estate investment trust. And that requires specific knowledge, not just about investing in real estate and building real estate, but also requires specific knowledge about the financial markets and the capital markets and how real estate trusts operate. One level beyond that might be somebody who says, actually, I want to bring the maximum leverage to bear in this market and the maximum specific knowledge. And so that person would say, well, I understand real estate and I understand everything from basic housing construction to building properties and selling them to how real estate markets move and thrive. And I also understand the technology business. So I understand how to recruit developers, how to write code, and how to build good product. And I understand how to raise money from venture capitalists and how to return it and how all of that works. And obviously not a single person may know this. You may pull a team together to do it where each have different skill sets. But that combined entity would have specific knowledge in technology and in real estate. It would have massive accountability because that company's name would be a very high risk, high reward effort attached to the whole thing. And people would devote their lives to it, take on significant risk. And then it would have leverage in code with lots of developers. It would have capital with investors putting money in and the founder's own capital. And it would have labor of some of the highest quality labor that you can find, which is high quality engineers and designers and marketers who are working on the company. And then you may end up with a Trulia or a Redfin or a Zillow kind of company. And then the upside could potentially be in the billions of dollars or the hundreds of millions of dollars. So as you layer in more and more kinds of knowledge that can only be gained on the job and aren't common knowledge, and you layer in more and more accountability and risk taking, and you layer in more and more great people working on it and more capital on it and more code and media on it, you keep expanding the scope of the opportunity all the way from the day laborer who might just literally be scrapping on the ground with their hands all the way up to somebody who started a real estate tech company and then took it public.